Hi, my name is Cam. I'm a cinematographer and editor with StoryKeep. I work closely with the director to craft a film from start to finish that feels authentic and powerful, all the way from filming interviews to diving deep into an edit to elevate these stories. In my own life, it's always been super important for me to document and archive memories. I've always taken film photos throughout my whole life of my family, my brothers, my mom and my dad, and now my new twins. And I think having those memories preserved for a lifetime is something that's super important to me. And I think in the same vein, it's on a whole nother level with a legacy film where you're hearing stories from the older generations, especially about the values that have shaped the family and stories that are important to them. And think bringing those all together to create a cohesive film is something that just grows more powerful as time goes on, having that for preservation's sake, but also for the sake of future generations becoming inspired by these stories of hard work and determination that brought the family to where it is today. I'm thinking in my own life, of my own grandfather, who I never had a chance to meet. I can't imagine how special it would be for me to hear him tell some stories I might never have heard, or even just to hear his voice would be really special. And I think that's kind of the value that Story Keep can bring. And so if that sounds interesting to you or your family or a family you support, please don't hesitate in reaching out.
Welcome to Who We Remember. I'm Jamie Yuenger, the founder of StoryKeep and your host for this podcast. It's wonderful to have you here and joining us for this show. This is a place where we have uncommon conversations about things that matter deeply, the people we love, and the purpose that we give to our own lives and legacies. Our mission at StoryKeep is to capitalize on the power of story for profound good in families of wealth. Since 2010, we've partnered with over 100 families worldwide, creating personal films and private podcasts that help a family celebrate their shared narrative. Our work is designed to deepen connections. My conversations on this podcast center around two questions. The first is, whose life story from your family would you most want to see documented? And the second question, what are you as a person and as a professional hoping to create and leave behind? Today, I'm honored to welcome Brian C. Adams to the show. Brian is a partner at Mack International, a premier firm that specializes in C-suite executive search and human capital consulting for family offices and enterprises. He is also the son-in-law of John Morris. Still living, John is now retired from his position as chief trauma surgeon at Vanderbilt University Medical Center. John is also a descendant of a very storied American family. John's 18th century ancestor was Robert Morris, best known as the financier of the American Revolution and a signatory of the United States Constitution and the Declaration of Independence, among other vital documents. John was very willing to welcome Brian into the Morris family. Brian has shared that it's still rare for people who marry into wealth-owning families to become not only a part of the family business, but also a part of the family office. Brian joined the Morris family office and has served as his father-in-law's right-hand man. Today, we will dive into the stories and the reasons why Brian would love to document John's life story. All right, please settle in with me for an intimate conversation with Brian C. Adams as we explore the enduring influence of his father-in-law and the legacy that Brian is building for himself. So, Brian, thank you so much for joining me for this intimate conversation about your father-in-law.
I appreciate the opportunity.
Yeah. I have to say I was very intrigued when you shared that your father-in-law, John Morris, was your pick. And I was hoping you could talk just in the beginning a little bit about how you met him and what your relationship was like in the beginning and a little bit how it's maybe changed and transformed over time.
Sure. So I met my wife in college. We went to a small liberal arts school in New England, and I met him at a parents' weekend, a homecoming type of thing. Before my wife and I were dating, we were friends in the same friend group. And so I met him, and actually, it's a pretty crazy story. So I think we'll get into kind of his background, but
Yeah.
professionally, he was a trauma surgeon. So Vanderbilt is a level one trauma surgeon, which means they take the most significant severe cases within the Mid-South region that cover Middle Tennessee, Southern Kentucky, Northern Alabama. Um, and he was in Connecticut visiting us on a just like a beautiful fall Saturday. And I was talking to him, just making kind of small talk. And he ended up having to leave and fly out of Hartford, I think the private airfield in Hartford, and take a fixed wing aircraft from Vanderbilt to go get somebody who had been in a car wreck in Cairo, who was a Nashville Vanderbilt patient. And so he had to leave early, go fly over to Cairo, pick this woman up in a Vanderbilt like fixed wing medevac aircraft, and then bring her back to Nashville. So I mean, I was 20, right, or 19, I don't
Yeah.
remember. And clearly I've, been drinking and has never even thought about that world of these people that, would do things like that. And that world existed. I didn't have any exposure to healthcare really or
Yeah.
anything like that. So yeah, it's an interesting way to get started in a relationship. But that's the first time I met him.
Wow. Wow. Um, my goodness. Like, yeah, highly responsible. The picture I'm getting of him right away is a super calm and clear-headed kind of guy.
Yeah, he's really intimidating in person. He's this big, he's probably 6'3", 6'4", um, big kind of gruff guy, but he's a total teddy bear once you get to know him. Um, but yeah,
Like, would he like if you said that about him?
yeah,
Yeah.
he's well
Yeah.
beyond anything like that.
Yeah.
And he's a real softy, but yeah, the way I describe him is, I think when you do what he did for that long, and you see that many people die and that much carnage in your life, the way I put it is, when you meet him, especially when he was working, it's not as bad now, but when he was like in the thick of it, doing regular rotations and working nights, and the volume is turned so low outside of a trauma situation that it's just really hard for him to engage. Like
Mhm.
nothing would rise to the level of engagement that he was used to in his day job. And so he just was kind of in this other zone. And so people would see it as maybe he was, um, I don't know, maybe he would come across as potentially condescending or aloof. But it's
Mhm.
just because in his world, if it wasn't life or death, it could wait or it wasn't that important. And so, very nice, cordial guy, not very talkative. And it would take a lot to get him motivated just because so much of his time was spent in this red line world.
Mm. Yeah. So quite a lot must have transpired between that first moment of when you weren't even dating your now wife and sort of becoming his right hand man in a certain sense in the family office. So um talk about how that relationship changed over time and maybe even, some of the stories that you would be interested in documenting that maybe came to your awareness through that period of time.
Yeah. So, obviously, at some point, I started dating my wife to get to where I am today. We started dating the spring of my senior year, and um, it got pretty serious pretty quickly. So we moved to DC and then ended up both going to grad school in Boston. And during that time, they have a very close family unit, my wife's family. There's three daughters. We all live in Nashville. We all now, two out of three of us live on the same property on a compound in Nashville. We see each other a lot. And that's just their culture. They're very close people. And so I got to know him pretty quickly. Well, at least we spent a lot of time together. At that point of his career, this would have been like the mid 2000s. I graduated in '04. So he was still really in the thick of it, working a lot. And so we didn't see him a ton during the week, but he would start traveling to DC and Boston and take us to dinner, and super generous people. So they would take me on their trips and summer vacations, and it was very much as if I was part of the family right away. Um, so I got to spend a lot of time with him, and he had three daughters, so he had never had a son, and I was the first one to kind of really spend a significant amount of time in the family at that stage. And so we became pretty close pretty quickly. We're both big sports aficionados. I love sports in all kind of forms and fashions. And he had played sports growing up and in college. And he's a day one season ticket holder to the Titans and the Predators, and big sports guy. And for me, that was like manna from heaven. I would, because I was 22 and I didn't have kids and I had a pretty flexible job. So I would go to every game that he wanted to. And we spent a lot of time together, going to football games, going to hockey games. And I think he's not the most emotive guy in the world, but it was kind of this classic parallel play that you get with a lot of men.
Yeah.
And that was like our parallel play. And it was great. I mean, ton of fun. And that's how we kind of got to know each other, through those interactions and time spent. And then we would do dinner after the games and kind of go to the games in the car together. But that's kind of how we became close. And then obviously when I married my wife, there's formalities, right? I became an ex officio board member of the family partnership because I'm a non-lineal.
Mm-hmm.
But there was quite a bit going on in our private investment portfolio that I started helping with. And we had like a 3 to 5 year process of trying to harvest a lot of these investments. And we had some real challenges. So we ended up spending a lot of time together professionally, probably in the 2010 to 15 range, and built kind of a professional relationship through that period as well, beyond just the personal. So,
So it has greatly, greatly developed over time.
yeah, I mean, I've been dating my wife for 20 years now.
Still going on dates, I hope.
Still go well. No, we should be better about it, but yeah, it'll be our 17th anniversary in May.
Hey.
Do you know what the traditional 17th anniversary gift is, Jamie?
I think you're going to tell me. I hope you know.
Furniture.
Oh,
I always give the traditional gift.
very nice. Okay, I know the first one is paper.
Paper, the first one,
Second
and
is
then I
phone.
lost track, but it gets a little goofy.
Yeah, it gets.
But I think it's fun to like exercise my creativity. So I got to figure out furniture without it being, a bad move. So I got to figure out something that will work for furniture.
I really look forward to talking to you in like June about that.
Let me know. I'll have something.
Okay.
Something.
So if you had the chance to sit down, or have, a third party like StoryKeep sit down and record and interview your father-in-law about his life story or stories that he knows from his family, what sits top of mind for you of what is just the most valuable?
So he comes from this really old New York family, and it's hard to say that without being completely pretentious. But he has this incredible family history of when his ancestors came over, they were one of the early kind of founding families of New York City in a lot of ways. So
They came from Wales in the
they were
17th
from
century.
Wales. Yeah, he said that they were sheep thieves. I don't know if that's true or not.
Okay.
Um, they came over and were successful merchants, landowners. So, for people who are American history aficionados, if you just Google Gouverneur Morris or Lewis Morris or Robert Morris,
Mhm.
there's this huge amount of history there. This would have been in the early 17th century. Um, so they owned a large piece of property, which is today Manhattan. Then there's a neighborhood called Mercian in the Bronx, which was their kind of family estate, signed the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, helped kind of finance the Revolutionary War in a lot of ways. And there's a whole lot of history that we could get into between now and then. But the richness of that experience and having the perspective of, you know, your ancestors being part of something that was so risky and so scary. And the way I think about it is, can you imagine I mean, how bad it must have been in Wales at the time for them to go on a boat in the 17th century to come over and then to be as successful as they have been and to be able to maintain that success over such a long period of time. Would not, I mean, they're not perfect. Like they've got plenty of challenges and issues, but to be able to have that lineage, I just think is a really special thing. Um, and to have to recreate that entrepreneurship every generation without resting on your laurels and to kind of bring it full circle to once I learned about all of that, having seen his work ethic and his professionalism, it was just really a stark contrast for me with what I think a lot of the narrative is around generational wealth.
That being that people are resting on their laurels and they've inherited wealth and they can kind of lead the good life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Mhm.
I mean, the dude is a worker. Like he still works at Vanderbilt,
Mhm.
79, I think.
Mhm.
And his wife is the deputy general counsel at the medical center and just super impressive people. And um, to be able to juxtapose that with this history and this lineage, I just found it remarkable. Not many people like that walking around the earth. So
No, yeah, there aren't. That is an incredible thing, kind of person to be able to be around and be related to. Um, I was wondering, prior to us jumping on, we were talking about this interesting Christmas tradition that the Morris family has and that you've been a part of, um, and maybe if you could speak to what it is, and also what maybe the bigger symbolism or why you feel it's valuable, and this would be something that you would hope John would be able to share and to have documented. So please tell us
yeah,
about.
so
Yeah.
it's this cool tradition and yeah, I think traditions are really underrated. Like a ritual is really underrated these days. We can talk about the fact that, organized
Wait,
religion.
before you do that, like, what do you mean by that?
Yeah, so I mean, if you just look at the studies, and I can only speak to America. I know you're in Europe,
Yeah.
but if you look at the decline of people going to organized religious services, participating in local civic communities,
Yeah.
nonprofit participation, even um, school participation as a civilian or as a non-professional, everything has declined pretty dramatically. And I don't give people advice because I'm like a YPO person, but in my experience and what I've seen in the world, I think there's a lot to be said for the fact that those organizations, those institutions have these big rituals associated with them. Like the same thing happens at the same time, and you say the same things, and
Yeah.
it's kind of forces you to get out of your home. It forces you to meet other people. It forces you into these uncomfortable conversations. Um, and for a whole host of reasons, not all of them are bad necessarily, but that's really just gone away from American society. or we just don't have a lot of ritualistic experiences any longer that are communal in our community, or I mean, certainly not nationwide, but even local. And I don't know, as somebody who is a parent now with my own kids, um, I think rituals are really helpful because it's just something to fall back on. Um, Whereas everything else can seem really chaotic and ad hoc, rituals are just like your baseline understanding of what happens next. And I think it's really a safe and healthy place to go to.
Yeah. And so when you, I guess, was it like the very first Christmas that you, after you
Yeah.
married your wife?
So, you know, we, like a lot of couples, we were dating and then engaged, and we were bouncing back and forth for the holidays. And I'm from New York originally, but once we started doing Christmas here in Nashville, especially when we had kids, that was kind of the rule. Santa comes to our house. They had this really cool tradition. They have this tradition where I think it's his great grandfather, my father-in-law's great grandfather. It gets hard with the greats. I get confused, but a long time ago, this person started buying a case of brandy every year, and he would put it in storage, and then they would open up a bottle on Christmas Day every year. And the cases got distributed and passed down over the generations, and for years and years we had just um brandy from you know like the 1800s, 200-year-old brandy. It was incredible, and obviously we kind of we saw what was happening, so we stopped drinking a bottle of it. We would just have like a decanter, and we would all have some. um and so it just was incredible to me for a couple of reasons. One, for his ancestor to be able to be thoughtful enough to spend the time and the resources to buy really, really good brandy and not drink it all at once, and to have the restraint and patience and foresight to think this would be a really cool thing for my ancestors to do 100 years from now.
Yeah.
And then you think through, like, he didn't even know who my father-in-law would be, let alone that my father-in-law would have a daughter, marry some guy who would then be drinking my brandy. It just takes a certain personality, right? And a certain mindset to have that kind of thoughtfulness.
Vision.
Yeah, that vision, exactly. That to think through a multi-generational time horizon and to allocate resources to that, knowing it would be this cool linkage between
Mhm.
the generations. I just was astounded.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it is not a religious thing per se, but I mean, the thing that comes to my mind is I grew up Catholic, and you go up and you're in mass and you take communion, and the ritual of drinking the same thing that everyone else is drinking, right? It has a very powerful feeling. Whether or not you believe, in that religiously or not, I think people, they sense how great that is. It's the same thing as, when you sit down and you have dinner with your family and you all eat the same thing, and we're not all having what we want individually, but sharing a meal. Yeah, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a recovering Catholic, and it's very similar to taking communion. I mean, we go to the same room. It's like the fancy room in the house that we only use once a year, and we are sit in a circle and kind of smell it, and everyone
Yeah.
takes a sip. And in my fraternity, we called it like the loving cup. And we passed it around, and so yeah, there's a lot to be said for that, I think. Um, we ended up well, the family kept getting bigger, and so we drank all the brandy, and now he buys uh like vintage brandy, and he's been storing up and building up his own reserves. So we still do it, but we ran out of whoever Morris's brandy stockpile a couple years ago, but it was great. Very
Yeah.
good.
Um, when I asked you sort of in the pre-calls about another thing that you would want to ask your father-in-law about, which was sort of like what would you want to talk to him about? You said his why. And I'd really love for you to elaborate on that, um, because I know we're going to talk about your why to a certain extent. So maybe there's a connection there. I don't know. But what do you mean by that? in regards to his why?
Well, kind of like I alluded to earlier, he grew up in this New York that doesn't really exist any longer of, you know, uh, servants and black tie dinner every night at home and drivers and chauffeurs and just old New York, right? That was his parents. And if you look at if you Google Edna Morris and you look at the obituary in the New York Times, just incredible, like denizen of old New York. And she drank champagne out of a straw and had a champagne limousine, all these interesting things, right? That just don't really work any longer. So he grew up in that world.
Hmm.
And for him to leave and decide that he was going to become, at the time, they didn't have trauma centers, but he was an ER doctor. And then to have the vision to think that he wanted to just help people and be of service. Um, I don't know. And compared to a lot of his other family members, his cousins and other branches of the family that did not have that mindset, he's very, like I said, quiet guy, but I would love to just get his, like, what motivated you to do this because there's a pathway, right, of you staying in New York and he went to all the right schools and member all the right clubs and had the right name. And there's a glide path there. And to choose to do not that, I know it's interesting. There's got to be a more compelling story there of why making that choice.
Thanks, Brian. That was really beautiful. Um, I'd really like to turn now, Brian, to sort of linking, if there is a link in your mind, between meeting your father-in-law and working alongside him and being family with him to the work that you do now, and not only the work, but also your personal life of the way you're living. And I'm wondering if you see a connection between his influence and, assuming you do, what you see is the connection there, the influence he's had in how you lead your life.
Oh, well, I mean, I owe a lot to him professionally and personally, obviously. But opening up my eyes to this whole other world of family offices and private investments and alternative investments and this whole other world that I didn't even know existed of, and it really goes to this broader statement that I've been relaying to a lot of people of, especially now that I work with families all the time. I think there's just a big misconception in the world that the world is driven by public markets and these big companies and, these brand names that we all know. But the reality is, it's families like the Morrises and private entrepreneurial families that drive the world forward. Like when you read articles about a city coming back to life or, when something bad happens in a community, it's the same like 5 or 10 families that step up and do something or they get called on. And there's what drives GDP, that drives the economy. It's the majority of employees are in small and medium-sized businesses. And so it really just alerted me and opened up kind of my eyes to this whole world of private enterprise and how these families are able to reinvent themselves generation over generation, keep pushing themselves, but also have this sense of history. Just wasn't a world I was familiar with. And obviously what I'm doing now, working with families on the search side, um, it's been very helpful context for me because I've now seen it somewhat as an outsider, but also as an insider. So I'm kind of this hybrid where, I'm a non-millennial, but part of this family, of this broader family with history. It gives me a good perspective, I think, when I talk to these people, and um, it's been hugely helpful with the most recent turn of my professional life, especially.
And so given that, what do you feel like you're really trying to create right now, or the legacy that you are hoping to leave behind in your profession?
Oh gosh. Well, it's interesting because, Linda Mack, my partner, she started the business 22 years ago. She was 51. I'm not really allowed
With
to
the
say.
C-suite executive search for
Yeah,
five.
so we do so Mack International, we're a family office executive search firm. So we work with single family offices across the country, help them find professional leadership and management for their family offices. It's a really niche business. It's a fascinating world. So Linda started the business, and she, if anybody listening is a family office person, you probably know Linda. She's incredible. Started it from scratch, like when the industry didn't even exist. And so she built this incredible business and has helped all these families over the years. But she didn't want to just wind it down or sell it. Um, and so she spent like 3 to 4 years trying to find somebody that would step in and be a partner and to help grow the business, but also make sure that the industry and the market still had an independent boutique to help them. It's a really big motivator for her. And she really means it. And so I think to have an alignment of that culture of, I understand her motivation there. It's not just about money. She's built something that's really helpful to families and she thinks it's important and she wants it to endure. It really resonated with me when I was looking to pivot in my career as well.
Mhm. Mhm. And so where you are now, is your hope that you help create sort of family offices and family culture somewhat similar to the strength of the one that you're a part of?
Yeah, I mean, I think,
Or how would you put it?
yeah, making sure that Linda's legacy sustains is really important
Hmm.
to me. Being able to help these families, because I do truly believe that they are a big lever in what pushes the world forward, are private enterprise and private families, entrepreneurial families. To be able to help them makes me feel really good at the end of the day that I did something to help a bunch of other people that really want to, do good in the world. Um, I find that very satisfying. Um, and then I think just for like me personally, um, to be able to have that, I'm in my 40s now, to be able to take my background as an attorney, as a private investor, but then I've been in the family office space for 20 years. I just know a lot of people and have been living in that world. To be able to bring that lens to the business, I think just was a really nice fit. It
Hmm.
just feels very natural when I work,
Yeah, yeah,
which is I think what all of us are trying to achieve on some level.
yeah. To put forth something meaningful that uses all of our talents and experiences. Yeah. Um, so Brian, like given like this breadth of experiences that you've gone through in a relatively short period of time, this is like what, 20, 25 years. I'm wondering what you feel has been sort of like your greatest personal progress, either as of late, if you want to talk about that, or if you can sort of see the longer trajectory of time, what you feel like, just internally, emotionally, spiritually, what has been the progress that you feel proud of?
So I have a really hard time speaking positively about myself. It's a real challenge. Taking accepting when people say nice things about me is really hard. So I'll kind of try my best, but to look back on in 2010 when I was a assistant district attorney, prosecutor, to being a real estate entrepreneur, of having two really successful platforms, and to to be able to have done all of that and built up that portfolio and from like scratch, from nothing. And then turning 40 and just wanting a new challenge and something different, and realizing a lot of things that I was doing personally and emotionally and psychically were not helping me get to where I wanted to go. Especially the last 18 months of getting sober and embracing this new job in the middle of your career has been pretty remarkable. If you take a third party, like arm's length, I think observation of just being able to reinvent yourself like that and to change modes of behavior that you find comfort in for 20 years, um, it's been hard.
Yeah. What has kept you motivated?
I think this idea that in this, I think of things as like chapters of life and seasons of life. And so I had a season of life in my 20s, I had a season of life in my 30s. My 40s is really about, for me, the way I think about it is when I'm 75 years old, what do I want success to look like? And so when I'm 75, we go to the beach in New England every year. My vision is that I'm on the beach with my wife and my children and my grandkids. We're all together on the beach. That's what I think success will be for me when I'm 75. What do I need to be doing today to be able to make that a reality? Well, I've got to take care of myself. So as simple as like, I can't jump off a building because then I won't be there at 75, right?
Right.
And like I mean, I think a lot of people who are my vintage, you know, we go to those places sometimes where we think it would be better if we just did that, right? So I've got to not do that.
Mm-hmm.
I've got to be married because I want her to be there. So I've got to keep the marriage going, got to be a good husband, like show up. I've got to have a relationship with my kids because if I don't, then they're not going to want to be with me at 75. And I have to keep working, right? Like I've got to be a professional and be successful in order to afford that.
Mm.
And so I just think about those three realms of my life, like my marriage, being a dad, and being a professional. If what I'm doing is going to get me there, and I want to be physically able to move around and cognitively aware, right? So got to keep doing what I think is the right thing to do to get me there. So that's kind of how I think about success. And this chapter of life is putting in that work today to make that a reality in the future.
Yeah. So basically, if you're there, you're not just on the beach, you're also throwing the frisbee.
Right.
Right.
Yeah, you're not like in a wheelchair.
On the sand. Okay.
Yeah, you don't have like an amputation from diabetes or you're,
Right.
with your
You
like,
want the beautiful picture of the lively, the lively
yeah,
family.
like the insurance website. Everyone's wearing white. It's like a beautiful day. Yeah, exactly.
Right. And fit. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. I really appreciate, Brian, that you have been able to, maybe very consciously, I'm not sure, but distill down sort of your goals into a single image. I don't know if you did that as an exercise or not for yourself, but
I did it in therapy. Yeah.
okay, it really motivates me to be able to just crystallize it all into one scene, let's say. So I'm going to take that from you.
Yeah, there's this concept. So there's externalizers and internalizers is a modality.
Mm-hmm.
I'm an internalizer, and I have these. They're called healing fantasies, where you have these recurring fantasies of what you hope would have happened, or what you hope people close to you will do. And you think if you just work hard enough, or if you punish yourself enough, those fantasies will come true. And for me, it's affirmation from my father and from my parents and proximity to them emotionally. And so that's the fantasy that I would have with my dad. That will probably never like happen.
Mm-hmm.
He's never going to listen to this. But
Mm-hmm.
so for me, it's like, okay, what can I be doing to make that a reality for me with my kids?
Yeah. Ain't that the question? I think that's one of the biggest questions of my life, for
Well,
sure.
and that's why working with families is so rewarding because one of the reasons when they look at success, I mean, they want to make money and they're capitalists but the really high functioning ones, it's like, listen, we want to be able to have Thanksgiving together because we could get this big return on capital. But if nobody wants to come to dinner, then like, what the hell are we doing here? And
Exactly.
those are the ones I like working with,
Mhm.
like, because that resonates.
Yeah, I hear you. Um, well, it's been a total pleasure to sit down with you again. I had the pleasure of being with you on your podcast
Podcast
earlier.
swap. We did it.
Yeah, we did.
Swap.
And um really it's been so nice to sit and talk with you. In closing, I was wondering, and I will encourage you, since your father-in-law is still living, to maybe find your way to say this in the language that you guys speak, the parallel play language.
Mm.
But what would you want to say to your father-in-law, like given what you've shared today? Um,
Thank you. I love you. And looking back on it now, giving people opportunities to struggle in order to find their self identity and have agency over their life is one of the best gifts you can give to a younger person.
and he gave that to you.
Yeah, in a roundabout way. He could have made things a lot easier and he didn't. At the time it was frustrating, but now looking back, totally the right thing to do because people that don't have something to struggle against, I think really have a hard time individuating and how having a true identity because you have nothing to push against. And he gave me that opportunity.
Hmm. Well, I doubt I will ever get to meet your father-in-law.
You never know.
You never know,
We
but
travels. We could go over there, go on a
come to a
canal
little bit.
tour.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I hope I do get to meet him, and I will have to look up, I'm sure.
Yeah. Small guy.
But I'm really glad I got to meet him through your eyes today. So thank you for sharing him, and also thank you for sharing you.
I appreciate the opportunity and congrats on all the work. It's really cool what you're doing. Keep it up.
Thanks. Thanks.